We are joined with a very special guest, a guest that's not Aaron, Christina. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we are as well. We are very excited because you operate in a different world than ours. It's in the same industry, but definitely a different skill set. In terms of how we know each other, before I actually introduce you to everyone, we've been friends for 12, 15, 35, no, a long while. We've been friends for a long while.
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years. Before I even got into marketing, we were friends, and then now our professional careers have collided so that we're operating the same world, which is cool.
Yeah.
Working with cool people is awesome. For everyone who doesn't know Christina, which is like most of everyone else, Christina's a digital marketer and an SEO specialist, a strategist. She's worked at some pretty cool places like IKEA, OpenText, some big companies, some small companies. She's got a lot of insight into the inner workings of how search engines actually operate. And she's helped companies both with like big strategies, small strategies, implementation across the board. And then like from probably the moment I met you, you've always had this like very curious this nature of you like to find things out, and you like to dive into things and not take someone's word for it and have a better understanding of like how things work. And in the world of SEO, that's a very good skill, because there's not like a perfect playbook where you can go like, hey, let's go do the SEOs. It's like you have to actually go and try and explore and do this stuff yourself. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. You've brought some very cool topics to discuss today, which we are excited about. These are what we're going to be talking about is definitely more in Christina's world. So which is sweet. I'll pretend I know as much as you. I don't.
Maybe you'll learn a little bit.
I hope so. I will learn a little bit. I can guarantee you. Every time we chat, I learn a little bit. So just try not to. I'll try not to bluff too much. So, cool. Let's dive into the first real chat, which is all about Google. Cool. This article is coming from the SE Roundtable. We'll put this link in chat for everyone. Google tests SGE AI, then the overviews in the wild, and it's a subset of the US users. So sweet. That's a super technical title compared to the ones that we've done in the past. But that's okay, because it is going to be a more technical conversation today, because that's welcome to the world of SEO. So SGE is search generative experience, which uses AI to provide responses to questions in Google search. On Friday, so this would have been probably the beginning of April for anyone watching it later on, the beginning of April, Google began to test SGE-based AI overviews in the real Google search results. So that means you may see AI overview snapshot answers in Google search results without being opted in to the Google Search Labs experiment, which originally opened in May of 2023. This is being tested on a small subset of searches based in the US. So if you're Canadian, not you guys just yet. Google decided to expand the test to those beyond who have opted in to get feedback and learn how more general population will find the technology helpful. Google is now experimenting with AI overviews in search for a subset of queries on a small percentage of search traffic in the US, and they may expand the test to more users over time, maybe in more regions. Google also said that they are first starting with a set of queries where we think generative AI can be especially helpful. Specifically, Google said that they've been able to learn from types of queries where generative AI adds significant value beyond what you are already getting within the normal Google search results. They said these queries are often more complex or involve questions where it may be helpful to get information from a range of web pages, like how do I get marks off painted walls? So the search would be, how do I get marks off painted walls? Wow. Okay, that's super cool, because like anything AI based right now is super hype. And we've got some pretty cool discussion topics. We're going to talk a little bit about what this means, how this fits in the future, all kinds of things like that. So right off the hop, what the heck does this actually mean for search engine optimization?
I think in general, people are pretty scared, at least SEOs are scared of AI and the implications it has for search, because you go from citing a website to just stealing information and throwing it up on there. We already know that Google's run into trouble with this before with Canadian news. Now you can't really get news on social platforms and things like that because, you know, they're taking away traffic from news sites. And this is kind of a play on that in the sense that this is kind of information that the AI has learned and puts together into search results, but it's not really attributing it to anybody in the same way that right now, if you see information that Google has a citation for, it will be associated with the website. Now suddenly this is just like AI crowdfunded information and it's not attributed to anybody. So where's the benefit in answering questions like getting marks off of painted walls when it's not actually driving traffic to your website anymore? So it is scary from the aspect of creating content for SEO purposes, you know, how you're going to be able to drive meaningful traffic if AI really kicks off in this way, right?
Right.
So, you know, in a certain sense, people are you know, bugged by the whole AI thing. Especially when ChatGPT first launched, there was a lot of chatter going on in the SEO world about what that would mean. You know, Google wasn't really in that space. Google was starting in that space, was awkward. You know, Microsoft is using it with Bing. And so it's kind of evolving and it's changing. But certainly now that they're continuing to experiment and showing it to real users who didn't opt in, suddenly we're thinking, okay, this could be real.
So, to my understanding, Google, for the last, well, as long as I can remember, they're trying to display information without the user having to make a click and actually go to a website to find information. That's going to be true of like Google Business Profile, so you don't have to go to someone's website to find their address, their phone number. And then actually in the SERP there, Google is actually answering the question or answering the query based on information that's found on one source. And then that's like great, the top result, and then they link to where the search engine actually found that information. So if you wanted to dive deeper, great, it's a click away. And now you're saying there won't even be a click option because it will just be an answer that is generated through Google. And it says, how do I get paint off my walls? And it's going to say, great, to get paint off the walls, you use an acetone base, whatever. It'll generate a query with zero reference back to its source material.
Yeah, and I think it's you know, it's interesting because there could be clicks integrated in there, but it's likely going to be, because Google wants to make money in search, you know, it might be a pay-to-play space. And who knows how that's going to look. Right. There's been a little bit where you can see, you know, search queries regarding this generative AI where it's recommending products. So, you know, to some extent, there is some integration with, you know, what it has archived for products and things like that. But you can see that, you know, suddenly you've got an explanation about why somebody should buy XYZ product, and there's your product, but you paid for it to be there. So, right. You know, it's kind of an interesting future where there are a lot of unknowns. But yeah, a big concern is how this is going to look for that organic search experience. It
feels a little bit like they're cannibalizing their own market here, because like typically if you're going to want to appear at the top of search, there's the quick way, which is advertising, like, you know, a paid campaign, you know, pick your campaign, you're at the top. And then there's this new generative model where they're just taking information from a variety of sites, but then no site is paying to have their content amalgamated into the actual search result. So if there's no click happening, how is that actually good for Google? Will potentially monetize a potential click? So they say, okay, great, we're going to have additional content outside of the actual answer. Because if I don't decide to opt into paying for the opportunity to have my content in the AI model, my content might be excluded because I'm not paying. And I know that we're in the realm of like, what will Google do, the crystal ball. It just seems like that's going to be really interesting because right now, The organic side is completely free. There is no, like, you don't have to pay Google to have organic search traffic. And it sounds like they're trying to monetize organic search traffic a little bit.
I mean, I guess they kind of always have, but I think it's changing because I mean, one thing that's kind of a tenet to Google, and you can see it in what they're experimenting in, now when you search for flights, you can start to buy your flight through Google's platform, right? So they're constantly looking for ways to keep people on Google. It's sort of like with Google search, it's a means to an end, but if they're taking you to another website where you can buy a flight, maybe you're not going to buy the flight through Google's thing, and then Google's not getting, a kick from whatever agreements they have with those different airlines or what have you. So, I think it's Google's experimenting on ways to continually monetize their own platform. Google's shopping is like a big part of that too, that you can see. So it's tricky because for a lot of SEOs, it's like, how do you play in a space that's free while at the same time that Google's looking to make money, and like, how are you serving these two in a way that's sustainable? Because one day you could be flying high in organic, and then suddenly Google's got a new update that comes out, you're getting hemorrhaged in your traffic, and
you're trying to figure out why.
Yeah, and it's like, sometimes the writing is kind of on the wall, and at least in my experience, it's really important to be paying attention to where Google is experimenting, what they're putting money into, even if it's not even in search, because they have a lot of products. For a long time, they've been using like CAPTCHA software and stuff like that. And I always had an assumption that, when you were selecting in the CAPTCHA which things were stop signs, you were telling Google Maps where the stop signs were. And lo and behold, now there's stop signs in Google Maps. So, a lot of their products all interfeed to each other. So it could be really confusing, but it's fascinating, but it is, you kind of have to be a little bit of a psychic to kind of look at, okay, what are they working on? What are they experimenting in? And like, what does this actually mean for like future products that Google's putting out? And how could this impact search? And,
So from a size perspective, it sounds like this is going to affect the larger players far more than it's going to affect the smaller players. Because the smaller players aren't going to be able to adjust or adapt. It's going to be who's large enough in the space. So you're going to get like the major businesses operating online in their categories that will game this and will use this to their advantage to either potentially create a competitive advantage against another industry competitor. I don't think a small business can even get involved with essentially staying current in this trend because there's still so much in the air. How does a small business get an ROI on this? That would be very, very difficult to determine in terms of the amount of research and value get out of a maybe. What do you think the future looks like for? We'll start with small businesses, small and medium-sized organizations, and then large ones. What do you think the future looks like for specifically AI-generated search results?
Yeah, for small businesses, I feel like a lot of them will put time into content marketing.
Okay.
A smart business isn't just doing content for SEO purposes. They're also emailing that out to, their customers, and they're integrating it into other areas of their whole marketing strategy. So it's more than just a small value from SEO. Maybe we posted and we're able to drive some organic traffic, but it's like that needs to be a part of a plan that is integrated with a lot of other things to make value out of the time that you put into it, and so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if we're making great content, how is that serving us to drive new customers?
doesn't sound like that's new either. So like for small business, like make good content.
Yeah.
Use that content as many places as you possibly can, but continually make good content.
Yeah, but now it's like, if a big part of that was like, okay, our content was driving organic search traffic, I'm sure, and especially with like the latest core update, a lot of people have been seeing shakeups with how their content's performing. So it's one of those things that it's like, okay, well, is my content actually just going to feed the AI machine that isn't serving me anything anyway? So where else can I get value? And then you're kind of looking at, as a small player, against the bigger businesses that just have a bigger presence on Google in general, especially if you're a mom and pop selling the same kind of things that say like Best Buy is selling. It'll feel like, you're kind of David and Goliath there. So it's kind of like finding your niche.
Do you think that becomes worse? Do you think that gap between David and Goliath is widening?
With the content, because I think the bigger businesses, generally their SEO content strategy is going to look very different than a small business. They're going to rely a lot on being able to drive to their product categories, but a small business has to kind of like earn the trust of people. Right. Whereas right. Best Buy, people know. So how do you earn the trust from people? It's kind of by proving that you know what you're talking about. That's through content, and other means to kind of build brand trust. So that's going to be kind of a tricky thing is if content isn't going to be a good avenue in that sense, what other platforms or specifically for SEO is kind of tricky. What kind of content can you make that isn't going to always have an AI response to? Right. You can't be answering questions anymore. Maybe you're kind of, adapting to things that are not, lend themselves to just being like AI generated in that sense. And I don't really know what that looks like yet.
Yeah, that's the crystal ball back to the...
Yeah.
Which is very fair, because again they keep those keys very close to their chest in terms of what they're going to release and how fast and to who, and then it'll change as soon as you have it figured out. There'll be constant changes there. So great. So like the little guy is going to have some additional challenges. What do you think it looks for the big players when they're putting out a ton more content, and now that content is just feeding an AI model that one, they don't control or own, and then now that AI could spit out anything because it's going to be influenced by who knows how many different things. Is it something that the larger players are going to continue to invest in, you think?
I think it becomes interesting because Google's gonna make recommendations from this AI that is going to be kind of it could benefit them, and they could look and say, okay, well, of the AI generated responses that are coming up, our product is seen as really fast and really user friendly, and whenever people search for that, the AI pulls our stuff and then says how it's so fast and user friendly. So they could find new insights and kind of lean into those. It could be that what they're in a larger sense with SEO, sometimes you're kind of, especially for bigger businesses, a lot of the search traffic comes from more vague terms, right? But suddenly the longer tail stuff could end up being a lot more profitable, a lot more valuable, and where they already know that they can check boxes with fast computer, now they can look at fast user-friendly computer with rainbow keyboard LEDs or something, and focus on like longer tail stuff that maybe the smaller players were doing well in, but now suddenly the bigger players can also play in that space through those insights.
So you brought a really good point up that I want to also factor into this, because typically if you're able to control the search, you're going to talk about the benefits your product or company has in the market. If it's an AI model now, where do you think negative PR comes into play, where a review that is completely critical of the product, whether it's true or not, you can have a competitor be building content specifically downplaying how good the product is, and then the AI model is now saying it's not recommended, it's not good, it's not fast, and it's pulling that information from a completely biased source that doesn't have the company's best interest at heart.
You just have to go bigger and bigger volumes for SEO if that's what you're gonna do. You know, user generated content can be great for combating that, you know, really grabbing lots of positive real reviews. Google says they try to keep out the fake reviews.
They all say that.
Yeah, right? But you know, so kind of just getting lots more content that says yours is good over those which say it's bad, and you kind of hope that also your domain authority and things like that hold more weight than the negative actors.
That feels like such an arms race on who is actually in it. Obviously it's in Google's favor because they don't care who wins or loses because they get paid either way, but it feels like there's going to be an attack and defense model where now I have to defend against somebody, because again, you can see some actors in the space going, well, I'm just going to talk bad about the specific shoe. And there's for just as many social media, I guess it wouldn't pull in content from social media, but it could. So have they talked about anywhere where they're getting the information from?
I think it's just information Google has collected.
Okay.
I mean, they have a lot of information archived. You know, they've got what they've indexed online, like books that they've even, you know, indexed and stuff like that, scholarly articles. They do have a treasure trove of information to make, you know, their best AI educated guesses at answering things. But to your earlier point about the arms race, that's kind of how SEO has always been.
Yes.
So, you know, it's just about kind of like beating others to the chase. I mean, I think one quick thing to consider with that is just the fact that you want to be ahead of these changes, right? As Google's experimenting, you want to be aware, okay, you know, we know that they're experimenting in the generative AI. What can we learn from this? How can we adapt? How can we change now? Because it's coming.
It's coming.
So
it's a good takeaway. We're going to move on to the next one, which we see a ton of. So I'll have a little bit more to share on this as well. So new ways Google is tackling spammy, low-quality content on search. This is coming directly from Google, so blog.google, we'll make sure. From Google, every day people turn to search to find the best of what the web has to offer. We've long had policies and automated systems to fight against spammers, and we work to address emerging tactics that look to game our results with low-quality content. We regularly update those policies and systems to effectively tackle these trends, so we can continue developing useful content and connecting people with high-quality websites. Today we're announcing key changes. We're looking to improve the quality of search and the helpfulness of your results. Improve quality ranking. We're making algorithmic enhancements to our core ranking systems to ensure surface the most helpful information on the web and reduce unoriginal content in search results. New and improved spam policies. We're updating our spam policies to keep the lowest quality content out of search, like expired websites repurposed as spam, and repositories by new owners and obituary spam. So we get a ton of this. We see it here in terms of like, hey, should you be focusing on like value or quantity or size versus how it's actually useful? Right off the hop, I can imagine what you're going to say, but I'll ask the question anyways. Why are they doing it? What prompted them to change to? Why are they suddenly focusing on cutting back the amount of spam or spammy content, low value content?
It's something that Google's always concerned about, is that, without making these core changes, people find the black hat techniques. They find the ways to game the system, and then, they can effectively show up and be low quality. At its core, Google is concerned with providing high quality links and search results to people so that they'll continue to use Google. So
right.
If you're having a poor experience with Google, you might look at other search engines. Yep. Or, especially now with things like ChatGPT and different ways that the industry is being shaken up. Some people are talking about, the death of Google could be upon us. I don't know if I believe that, but, they've got to keep up and keep relevant.
Right.
So, this core update is one way that they're trying to address some of their criticisms and maintain and continue to improve.
I definitely see where it's like the heightened competition in the space. So as soon as you've got like a ChatGPT or a Grok or any other of the AIs that are saying, hey, now instead of asking Google where you would typically ask that question, you could ask something else. Well, naturally people are going to try the new thing and they're going to ask that question, or they're going to query that new thing. So I hear your answer going, hey, what prompted the change? Competition prompted the change, because there's more competition in the market. Who the heck is this targeting? The article kind of indicates, hey, the people that are generating low value content and it's unoriginal, or it's expired, or it's old, or it's not actually providing any value. Who are they targeting on the user side? Who are they trying to actually provide useful content for? Then who are they actually trying to, we'll say, remove traffic going to those websites? Who's actually affected by this?
So the industry chatter on this is pretty interesting. When you look at what Google provided in their update and what they're claiming to be doing is, looking at AI generated content, content farms, things like that. That can sometimes affect, people who have microsites for content or subdomains and that sort of thing. They can be potentially negatively impacted by something like this if Google decides, hey, that looks like pretty spammy to us,
right,
for example. But in general, I think the conversation on who this is targeting is interesting, because a lot of people say that their websites specifically, just homegrown, genuine, not written by an AI content has been negatively impacted by this pretty significantly. And a lot of people are chatting that, Google is just using this as a way to kind of promote more of the channels of how they make money. Ooh. And promote, the areas where if you have a lot of ads running on your content, let's say on your blog, even though your blog has really good valuable content that people are spending time to read, they might still be pushing, the avenues where they're able to make money.
More money themselves.
So, there is that critique. It's still kind of early days in terms of how this core update has really shaken things up. But I think this is going to be one of the more notable ones for this year, of people getting out their pitchforks and torches because of, people who feel like they've genuinely done SEO white hat in a true user-friendly way, who have been negatively impacted and just don't see any good reason as to why. But
that's so surprising. So that was not an answer that I was expecting at all. I was expecting the exact opposite of hey, it's homegrown, it's good, valuable content. That would be something that they would actually be getting a bump in the right direction on. But you're saying they're actually getting a negative result because of outside factors. So it sounds like money is at play here in terms of what's actually good for the end user is not in alignment with Google being hey, well, I can maximize the profit here, so why am I not That's weird. That's interesting because I normally, Aaron and I normally preach this because what you brought up was like, hey, you can generate your blog through whatever ChatGPT, and then you can spend a fraction of the time creating content. You've got more of it. I was expecting you to say, hey, those really low value blog posts are just going to be just hammered. Like, don't even bother doing them. But it's also negatively affecting the good ones too.
I mean, if you think about it, if you have good, valuable content on there, it could be what's being sourced for other people to rip you off. You know,
right.
It's I think it's not, it's kind of a weird time because making creative endeavors could end up spiting you because of all the rip-offs that end up, using the various techniques to get ahead of you. And especially in a core update where you're hoping like, hey, I'm doing like genuine good value stuff here and I've been hurt by it, it's discouraging.
So this specifically says in search, is it also affecting people that are producing like a ton of video content? And are they able to rip off, like, if I'm producing great video content, not just written, and I know I'm kind of inferring here, but because this article specifically says with its search results, are people that are generating video content also being negatively impacted by things like that?
Well, video does show up in Google search results as well, especially if you're looking at, say, like DIY or how to do something where video is seen as valuable. It does show up in search. So, and a lot of, especially if you're transcribing or you have a lot of content like in the description, there could be a lot of things under the fold that could be, being cited, sourced, indexed by these AI tools and being used in ways that could impact you too. I mean, the one benefit of video is that it's largely, browsed through its proprietary platforms, and YouTube and Google search kind of intersect, and they certainly have areas in which there's some overlap. One of the things is embedding YouTube videos on your pages, and the SEO content of those pages could impact the SEO performance of that video, and also vice versa. The video can also positively impact the SEO of the page. So that's one way they intersect. And then, of course, if you have a lot of transcription and descriptions, like timestamps, things like that in your videos, those can all be cited by Google search. You'll notice sometimes when you search on Google, it will pull you to, So, things like that, they kind of intersect. But YouTube search is still, at least in my opinion, different from Google search. So, if you're looking at the videos that you'll get served in Google search versus YouTube for the same search, they will be, there will be variances there. Some of it will be user based. So, based on your watch history, etc. Things like that will change it. But I mean, I think it's the ways that people are ripped off in video, I think, are different from the ways that they can be ripped off in content and Google search. So
who can actually benefit from the change then? So if the video is kind of a different thing, and if the good people that are creating valuable content are kind of getting penalized, maybe how does a business stay ahead of it? How can you benefit from the update?
I think it's important that with every core update, you're really monitoring your performance. And, especially as this big news comes through, core updates tend to be pretty big shakers when they add like full descriptions to them. Sometimes they'll do algorithm updates, whatever, and it's kind of like, there's not too much to be said there, but you gotta see, because some people will be moving in the positive. You need to look at what those pages are moving in the positive, and then for the pages moving in the negative, looking at the different like KPIs and web signals that could be alluding to why it's in the negative could be a way to understand it. Do those pages have high bounce rates or other UX stats that might be cueing to Google that they're spammy or low quality? If you have pages where people are spending maybe 10 seconds and going back to Google search results, Google doesn't like sending people to those pages. Right. So those are things to look for. But, if you have good quality content that suddenly dropped off the map, it might be worth doing some reverse searching, seeing, are there other, are there people benefiting from talking about these same topics, and what are they doing different from what I'm doing? And collecting that anecdotal evidence, and then coming back to some of the search news websites, and what the industry is saying about how the changes have impacted people, because it is tricky, especially when you're a singular business. You've only got your one view, whereas these websites will have looked at hundreds, thousands of websites across many industries, and they'll be able to say more broadly. But trying to be proactive and not letting negativity simmer for too long is going to be very important, because if you let your ranking slide and sit in a low position without really kind of trying to push it back up, you might settle somewhere which is much lower than you want to settle. Right. And working back up once it's been there for a while is pretty tough.
It's not surprising to hear like a proactive approach is like the better approach to take. So like dedicating time to actually looking at your analytics, looking at what pages are actually driving traffic into the site. It makes sense to know that. Those are like your value pieces. Like, hey, not every page on your website is going to be generating the amount of traffic that it should be, or in proportion. So knowing what should be happening, what was working last month, pre-update into this, something that you're going to want to obviously keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And it does make it. There's obviously a barrier of entry there. So if you have no business in your analytics period, if you're not comfortable looking at things like this, it might be worth your while to actually get a second opinion on it. It feels like things are becoming more important to actually like, you better know. If you don't know, you're putting yourself at a big disadvantage. So
yeah.
We're gonna move on. Another, again, very interesting topic. Google begs SEOs to stop showing Google things, show visitors things instead. So obviously this is the robot human conversation. Google's search liaison responded to a series of posts on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, leading him to beg SEOs to stop trying to show Google in quotes, explaining that the process of doing things on your site to rank better in Google is the opposite of the advice Google is giving. Instead, show things to your users or visitors that those people will like. He later begged, he was begging, saying, I'm begging you for anyone to stop focusing on specific content things. It's not whether a TOC or saying something is an expert or somehow a specific signal. It's that these things might indicate a pattern of doing too much show Google things and taking away from just being a good site for people, which is actually what Google wants, what you want to reward. He goes on to list out some SEOs, what they do, because he thinks that Google wants you to do. So, stop trying to show Google things. I've been through this so many sites, and at this point, and I appreciate the feedback, the patterns are often like this. Something saying an expert reviewed the content because someone mistakenly believes that ranks them better. Well, that's some shady stuff right there. Expertly reviewed. Weird table of contents things shoved at the top because who knows, along the way somehow that became a thing. I'm guessing people assume ranks you better. The page has been updated within a few days or even is fresh on the exact day, even though the content isn't particularly needing anything fresh. And probably someone did this really light rewrite and fresh date because they think that, again, shows Google you have fresh content will rank you better. The page ends with a series of, hey, here are some frequently asked questions, because someone used a tool or other method to just add things they think people search for specifically, because they heard if you add a bunch of things of popular searches to the page, it ranks you better, not because anyone's actually coming to your page and wants that. I can barely read through the main content of pages because I keep getting interrupted by things shoved in the middle of it, which isn't so much a show Google thing, think as much as it's just an unsatisfying experience. So I'm going to summarize that because it's a lot of what this person is actually mentioning here. We talk about this all the time. There's a teeter-totter between making the robots happy and making the human happy. And it's a chicken and egg problem because you need the robot, you need the Google, you need the robot to get your content in front of the user. But the user's got the money at the end of the day. Google's not paying you. Google's not purchasing your product. a person is purchasing your product. So you really have to keep both people happy, where like you're worried about conversion, on-site conversion, which is people, and then actual traffic to page, which is robot. I completely agree with this. There's so many articles. I mean, how many articles? This is my how many times have you seen where you're looking for a recipe and it's like someone's life story before you get to actually figure out how to make chicken noodle soup? And it's wild. It's like that was completely written for a robot. It's got almost no use to a human being. Brutal. And it's not surprising to see that Google's concerned about it. Obviously, they're concerned about it. From your perspective, why does Google care about the human experience?
Because they want people to use Google.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
The product owner wants the people using the product to have a good experience.
Yeah. So, you know, if every time you search for recipes, you're frustrated, eventually you won't use Google for searching for recipes anymore. And then those ad dollars and all the other stuff that they could potentially make, they're not making.
Outside of recipes, because that's the low-hanging fruit that I always laugh at, other major categories of search that are just predominantly bombarded with robot-centric content versus human-centric content. Do you see any, like...
Try searching for how to do anything for SEO and you'll quickly find all the people who think they can out-SEO each other with garbage. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
It's a fun one for sure.
I haven't done that one personally, but I can imagine that SEOing your competition out of SEO content. Oh, I'm gonna do some Googling after this. That's good. Any other areas that you've seen that are like absolutely comical?
I mean, I feel like there's if you end up searching like how to do something, it's the ad farming on content has gotten pretty brutal, and it's like, you know, this article talks about, you know, injecting with other things. Like, so many pieces of content now have videos interjected, and I think news sites have been pretty bad for this too. You know, in the ways that they do a media mix that's like, you know, a little bit overkill. But I feel like a lot of content, at least, can be, you know, if you're
better UX.
Yeah,
better UX.
It's kind of sad because I think a lot of the websites that tend to do better UX aren't showing up in Google for those things.
Well, I'm hoping that actually turns around, because at the end of the day, like, they're building. It's kind of crazy how like the human creating content for the human and creating content for the robot aren't more. That Venn diagram is not bigger. It feels like it's very separated. Where like, hey, I'm gonna, what's the joke in SEO? The SEO person is doing content for the tavern owner, barkeeper, small business owner, and it's just a bunch of keyword stuffing, and it's like great for the robot, but completely unusable for the actual person looking for like the local watering hole. I mean, I've got a zillion examples of like how we see it. It's like, no, you've gotta, at the end of the day, you can have all the traffic in the world and Google could be pushing you everything, but if your conversion is $0, well, guess what? You're going broke with a lot of traffic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I guess it ties into one of the earlier topics about the generative AI, is Google might just be at the point of, hey, you know, people don't want to like go through your trash websites to get the meat of the information, so we're just gonna put the meat there right for them, you know, and then
I kind of like that. And like, there's a specific part of me, my non-marketer, my average citizen hat on is just like, hey, I just want the information. Just give me the information. Don't make me go looking for it. It's 2024. And the other side of me, like the marketer side of me, is going like, I've got to generate value out of that information because I can't give everything away for free.
Yeah.
Because there's some revenue has to come back, whether you're selling ad dollar or ad placement or whatever. There's got to be a balance. So it just feels like that balance, that teeter-totter is so skewed into the robot and not the human. So, that one rubs me the wrong way. So, how has this mindset impacted websites like we've encountered? Like for the ones that you've got, the ones that you've worked on, let's do big and small again. So like the smaller sites that you've worked on, the smaller businesses, how has that impacted the strategy behind building content in the first place?
I mean, it's tricky because, sometimes the things that you create that are of high value don't really get a ton of search volume. So you gotta find the creative ways. Okay, like how can I kind of make this serve the two evils there, or the one evil really? But so like I have seen in the past where there's like a nice big chunk of content that's really great. It's on a niche topic, and FAQs are shoved at the bottom as the article mentioned, because it doesn't really have enough content that speaks to those higher value search terms. So we've got to kind of like throw that in there. So it's like people are just finding creative ways to have more content that is user friendly in the sense that it's non-invasive.
Right.
I mean, like the recipe issue is the most invasive way of doing it. But then you'll notice that there are a lot of websites that are hiding content in different areas, even though Google says that, if you're hiding content under like accordions or whatever, that they're not seeing it, they are seeing it. But, people are looking for those different ways of injecting the SEO in low friction ways, and hopefully maybe there are people who find value in it. Maybe sometimes there is, but yeah, it's very difficult because I think the fact of trying to make your page as highly relevant to the search terms that you want to rank for as possible, it's kind of like you need the content to be there.
Right.
But it's like finding the ways to serve the Google bot that aren't that are user friendly and aren't just showing Google. It's kind of silly to ask this question of SEOs, in my opinion. It's like a best case scenario, like, hey, like maybe I'll make the most user friendly thing ever and nobody ever finds it,
and no one ever finds it. Yeah. That's like the build it and they will come. It's like, no, you'll build it,
yeah,
and no one's going to come because it wasn't designed to have people even find it. So
yeah,
it's a real balance between like marketing and sales, where it's like the marketing side of it is great. Can we bring awareness to it? Can people find it? Is it usable? Does it display? And then the sales side of it is, does it convert? It's got to do both. And I think that balance is, from my perspective, there's a lot more that is going into the marketing side of it with like things like AI, where they're just putting content out there, but there's no real strategy on like, hey, why is that person going to find it useful? Why are they going to make a click once they're on your site? They're going to go, hey, yeah, great, it was at the top of search and I'm gone. You got me, and then you're never going to get me again. It's going to display the next thing. So how have you approached balancing the teeter-totter? I put you on the spot. How did you?
I can't say that I'm not, guilty of doing stuff like this. Like I mentioned earlier, when Google puts out new things, jumping on the bandwagon early is great.
Yeah.
When the FAQs, for example, they released at the same time as how-to articles for Google, and essentially what Google was saying was, hey, use this code markup on your content and it will display uniquely in Google search. So one of them was FAQs, so you could wrap this code around the question and around the answer, and that could have some unique play in Google search. And how-to was the same way. If you marked up all the different steps,
it seems like such a quick win. Oh, if you give me this code, I can just put it. That's like the light switch. It's like, oh, if you just do this thing, it's gonna work.
Yeah. So I remember when that first released, it was like everybody was full hands on deck to, put their stuff. And so people were making how-to articles out of stuff that wasn't even really how-to stuff. So, and same with FAQs, it'd be like, yeah, this is a question, and like wrapped it around all their stuff, and like with Google's algorithm updates, they're constantly like changing that stuff so that those crummy results stop showing. But I'm definitely someone who's an opportunist in the sense of like when these things come up, like let's take advantage, but take advantage smart. Don't try to force things that they shouldn't be forced, which I don't blame people for wanting to try, but
there's value in being the early adopter and fast to market, being first to the saying is the second mouse gets the cheese, but the earlier word gets the worm. I would rather take both of that, take advantage of the opportunity but have a long-term strategy in mind. So if you're going to try and cheat it with bad FAQ content, or it's like, that's not going to play very long. So how fast can you get your value back? That's funny. Obviously I like hearing all like the black hat stuff in the industry, and there's some wild stories in here because it's an unregulated industry. The consequences are fairly low. It's not like anyone's going to get in real trouble for this. Are you like lying? Well, maybe there's a little embellishing, depending on like the brand itself and the values that the brand also has. Like, does it even need to fit within like what our core values are as the business? I'm just trying to get people to find us. It's wild. It's a crazy. Does it still feel like the Wild West?
I guess because things are constantly changing. I think the Wild West kind of came back up when ChatGPT was suddenly in everybody's faces. It was like, oh, we're kind of playing with sort of like a new space where there's no rules. And it was a bit of a Wild West, especially because because like with ChatGPT, it was like the content was endless, right?
Yeah.
So sorry, I'm just getting.
That's all right. No, it's all good. I mean, Aaron and I have talked about this a lot off stream, where it's great. You're going to go generate content through ChatGPT, and the Wild West is your brand still needs to have professional accountability about the content you're actually releasing. Going like, you're not giving medical advice or legal advice, but at the same time, that's still coming out under your brand. What the heck are you doing? If you're satisfied with that answer, it's a good answer. It writes beautifully. It writes better than I do. It really does make things easier. But is it right? Is the content actually true? Well, you're going to need to have some kind of underlying expertise in the industry to actually validate if the content even makes sense or if it's wrong.
Hey guys. Oh, speaking of talking off stream, Aaron here, mostly producing. I wanted to take this opportunity to chime in with a couple of questions that relate to this topic specifically.
Ooh, okay.
So tying into that Wild West concept, do you think, because in my experience, SEO used to be a real Wild West, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when people were still like doing keyword stuffing and lots of early SEO tactics. Do you think there are still a lot of SEOs pushing outdated tactics? Is that something that you're seeing a lot of in the industry still? And then a separate question to that, but I think worth discussing, and I'll pass it back to you guys. Given the challenge of balancing pages that are optimized to appear in search versus pages that are optimized to provide the best user experience, is there an argument for creating a mix of pages on your website that tend more towards a search optimized experience, and then pages on your website that tend more towards a user experience optimized experience, with the intent to direct traffic to those pages through paid ads rather than relying on organic traffic to land on those pages that maybe don't send the right signals to a search engine, but provide the best user experience for people visiting your website?
That's a good money question there. I'll address the first one about using outdated tactics. I still see it a lot. The most concerning thing I see is like backlink horror shows, where small businesses will basically, they throw their website to the wolves of like getting links, and they'll just their website will be linked from all sorts of different websites, all of them really low quality, but it just guarantees you get tons of backlinks, and it's their kind of like easy way of of getting a lot of links to their website, which hopefully bounces up their authority, so they feel like it's a necessary evil they have to do. The backlink question is not really easy because, you know, what garners you links to your website is when you have valuable pages that people want to talk about.
Right.
And, you know, it's not always easy to make that happen, especially if you're not findable as it is. Like, you got to do a lot of your own PR and kind of get your name out there, and it can be very difficult. So I totally get why the backlink horror exists. But, you know, it's tough because you kind of come back to it and you're looking at it and it's like, oh, geez, it looks like the only websites linking to you are kind of bad news. And Google will take note and use this against you later. It's hard. So, you know, that's one of the ways that I really see it. I think like keyword stuffing and things like that exist, but in new ways. And it's kind of like the page that never ends.
Oh.
It's kind of like the new keyword stuffing. It's like, rather than having the keyword a bunch of times in 500 words, it'll be a bunch of times in 5,000. But, you know, it appears 20 times in the 500 and the 5,000 version. But, you know, now there's all this, like, content. And you've also got the synonyms of the content. And you kind of... And that's why things like the table of contents that this article is talking about exists, because you have this massive ugly page that nobody wants to scroll through, so you might as well let people get to the meat of what they actually want to see. Right. And, you know, you're serving the Google God that way. So, you know, the old tactics totally exist, but they've just taken on ugly or different forms, you know.
I mean, shout out to HubSpot, because I love their blog, and it starts with a table of contents, and typically what I'm looking for, those articles provide me a ton of value. So there's like still a right way to do a table of contents, and there's obviously a wrong way to do everything. So, like, I mean, obviously there's a good and bad to that. I haven't seen too many examples of bad tables of contents, because normally I'm not even looking. It's like, oh, you don't give it to me, I'm gone. It's so easy to click off. The back button is so, yeah, like there's a fingerprint on my phone where you can see me hitting the back button. But
yeah.
There's also tons and tons of, like you said, with the timestamps and things like that, where they do provide a ton of value, where it's like, hey, cut to this, because, I mean, do you find that it's, and I want to go back to Aaron's question too, do you find that the long form content, good long form content, is having a hard time beating out bad long form content? Because typically, like, the long form stuff used to be really, really valuable, but now you're saying the tactic has shifted between 20 keywords in 500, now 20 keywords and all the extra junk in 5,000. I didn't see that long form content was kind of under threat, and you're saying it kind of is.
It could be. I think long form content is really it's very difficult for businesses to do in general.
Okay.
And it's hard to sell, right? Because it's like, hey, you know, you kind of gotta write like a lot here, and it needs to be good. And, you know, that's a big investment for people. So there are a lot of companies that end up doing, you know, smaller blog posts, and nothing is really moving the needle because it's kind of, you know, spread out too thin.
Just to provide a definition, where does it stop being short term, and when does it start being long term in terms of like where people should be viewing that spectrum?
I think long form is probably at least 2,000 words or more.
2,000 words or more.
Yeah. And, you know, for the long form, in terms of is the good content still, you know, performing well, or is the bad content beating it out? Kind of harkening back to that business question is that, you know, when you're writing good content, you're kind of investing a lot of your creative integrity into it. So to then put the SEO into it, a lot of businesses are really hesitant. And that's where the good content, I think, ends up not doing as well is that a lot of companies don't really want to SEOify that long form content, or take on because like the headers and the different ways that you organize the content. It's very important that has like the SEO focus in it. When they set out to do the long form stuff, they've kind of already got their structure and how they want to go about it in place. And it's very difficult to make long form content with SEO as the foundation. I think. Yeah, okay. It can be tough. So I think that's why bad content can outperform it, is because the good stuff doesn't really stay on topic enough to perform in search. So it is kind of weird, because you will find you get a mix depending on what you're searching for. Where you'll hit something and you're like, wow, Google, you really did your job, this was great. And then other times you're Google. you're like, man, this like doesn't even answer the question. It just like cites the question in the content and doesn't even get to the meat of the thing. And you're traveling back and that sort of thing. And yeah, so it
next thing you know, you're on page 2, which doesn't even exist.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tricky, but I think if businesses really incorporated SEO at the foundation of their creative process, they'd find it a lot easier to perform well when they are working hard on that content.
Aaron, to your second question, so I think Christina answered the first one. The second question was around balance, correct? Being balanced between designing for the UX of the site versus the robot, correct?
Yeah, so from a conversion optimization standpoint, we know that once you've got visitors on your website, it's very important to convert them to customers as efficiently as possible. And excellent UX is a big part of doing that. And it can be very difficult to move people off of a blog post, for example, into a conversion. So the question is there an argument for trying to create a balance between pages that are optimized for search and separate pages optimized for conversion, which you then direct paid ads to, rather than relying on organic traffic to actually drive your customers to your website?
Mm-hmm. Should I go ahead?
Oh yeah, dive right in.
All right, so I think the first thing that is very important for any business with an online presence to know is kind of their customer journey online and mapping that out. And what does the customer journey look like for someone who's traveling in from Google? Where are their entry points and where are their exit points? And you kind of got to look at it almost like, it helps to have the allegory of a physical store, for example, because, you can kind of think, okay, well, at what point did I kind of encourage them to leave or give them an excuse to leave, and kind of understanding, okay, well, for things like, say, the blog post where people are kind of maybe in and out, they get their information and then they leave. Right. What am I doing to encourage them to stay? Having, thinking about it in the aspect of a store, like things like the perfume department can be very assaulting on the senses. You're getting, salespeople coming at you. You've got all this product around, but you've got things that are keeping you busy and keeping you curious. And it's kind of important in the same aspect that if you have people who are landing on your page, looking for answers or looking for specific content and then going, well, okay, what does that customer look like? Because they're obviously different than the person who searched for my business by my brand name.
Right, the direct versus organic, yeah.
Yeah, so, creating a strategy that specifically utilizes understanding that customer persona and how it's different is important. A lot of businesses will kind of have their ideal customer persona, but they're not really considering, the other entry points and the other types of people that are coming to their website and why they are.
It's so interesting that you bring up customer journey mapping and then user personas, because typically when someone is thinking SEO, in the conversations and the social circles we revolve in, normally those two things never come up. They're viewing it like, as soon as you start talking about, hey, treat it like a physical store, and that's why they put all of the impulse purchases by the cash, because they know you have to get there, you're committed to buying the product. Now I can kind of inject a bunch of spammy content at you because I know you're not going to leave, and then I'm going to make the entry point of the store really nice and beautiful and everything. And there's tons of business owners that have retail locations that seems like common sense to them, where it's like, there's no technical aspect. It's like, hey, I'm trying to make it inviting, and then I'm trying to maximize conversion. Great. When you break that down and say the digital aspect is the same, you need to know your customer journey, and you need to have that persona mapped out, multiple personas, many personas, because it's not just one buying group. Those are like fundamental pieces of every business, knowing and that's small business friendly, is knowing who your customer is, what their pain points are, what they're looking like, all of the details, as many details as possible that you can have around that should be not only affecting traditional selling, but also like the digital aspect of your store as well. So that's good that you brought that up, because we normally don't have businesses even considering increasing their value online through the understanding why people are buying the product, why they're showing up. They're just viewing it as, oh, SEO is technical, I'll hit the light switch, I'll hire a developer, I'll hire someone who's an expert. It's like half of it comes back to you need to tell the SEO what you're actually doing well. They're going to find the traffic and the sources of traffic online, but if it doesn't actually match what the business is doing, bad traffic is literally no traffic.
Yeah. I mean, it's treating SEO like a check mark is doing yourself a disservice, because SEO obviously is interested in the customer journey, because we're interested in journeys, period, and the moving from Google search, which is often an entry point where people might know your company, they might not, and what does that mean, and depending on where they're coming in from, what kind of experience are they getting, like SEO inevitably gets involved in all those things, and is interested, and can also provide a lot of insight and information and receive, right? Because it should be informing. If an SEO is driving a lot of traffic to a certain page that's not converting, but they're not really interested in understanding why, or how to get value out of that page, or maybe it's not speaking to the target demographic, so obviously it's not going to convert. Like being integrated and understanding those business fundamentals to maximize SEO is essential.
And I think that's true of big business and small business. So I think did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
I think there was just also the point about separating kind of the SEO journey from, say, like a conversion journey potentially.
Right, back to Aaron's question.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's to that customer journey piece of it. There is naturally going to be the way someone understands when they're visiting your website, when they click on an ad versus when they're coming through organic search. It's your brain is kind of primed differently, right? Because you're clicking on an ad, so what you're getting is going to be different. So I think it is, totally reasonable to approach those different scenarios in different ways. An organic search person is going to be more trusting of what they're clicking on naturally, because they feel like, okay, this person has earned the right from Google to show up here. They must be the best at whatever this thing I'm looking at is, so they trust. Versus an ad, it's like, oh, well, you kind of pay to be here. Who knows if you're really the best? You could be kind of bad.
Deep pockets.
Yeah. So it's like the kind of way that you're presenting information on like a kind of like campaign level page is going to be different. You need to kind of understand that person will have a different approach. People who click on your website from an ad, especially if you have kind of like that cookie consent, which I think most websites have to have regardless nowadays, ad people are users visiting from an ad are less likely to consent to their information being collected. So you already got a ding against you because you're not collecting insights on a lot of them outside of understanding, what Google Ads is seeing, for example. And other behaviors like that are going to be just a part of what an ad user is like and what an organic search user is like. So they should be different experiences, and what those look like is going to be, dictated by how you want to present your company to these various, entry points, essentially.
Essentially, what you're saying is, hey, there's a couple of user personas and a couple of customer journeys just based on, are you advertising or are you trying to get organic? Mm-hmm. They're just different fundamental people. So, Aaron, I think that answered everything about your question. So I think we can move on.
Oh yeah, by all means.
Good. Another fun one. I mean, it's always fun talking about AI. So, is ChatGPT the Google search killer we've been expecting? This one's coming from Search Engine Land. Again, the link will be in the video description. Alta Vista, Lycos, Yahoo. Once upon a time, these were all popular search engines in the world. Then came Google, and obviously search became better. Since around 2002, Google has been the search engine, and its dominance has only grown every year. It has ascended to a monopoly status of 91.6%. That's incredible. 91.6% of the global search market share in February per StatCounter, and a lot of Google killers have come and gone in the last 20 years. Could OpenAI's ChatGPT be the unexpected change? Altman started by essentially calling the current Google search experience boring. I'm assuming that's Sam Altman. He doesn't want to copy Google's model. He seems to want to reinvent search to be specific the way people find information, as we've known it for 20 plus years. Dwayne Foster, VP of Industry Insights at Yext, believes we're seeing a major shift in the traditional search model right now. Why fight Google in search? Why not simply offer search with no ads? You're already paying a subscription, use ChatGPT. So instead of an ad, so included is an ad-free search. It's easy to kneecap the entire paradigm to simply change that paradigm. So obviously, like if you're not having an ad experience, that makes sense. But this is all hypothetical at this point. And as Brex Tebbit, CEO of PubCon, pointed out, Google still has its majority advantage over OpenAI, its treasure trove of data, so great. Take books. It's estimated that Google has digitized around 40 million books. That's an incredible source of training large language models, and OpenAI doesn't have any kind of access to anything on that scale. Then there's Maps. As we delve deeper into the world of visual language models, Google's collection of billions of Street View photos is a goldmine. Sure, OpenAI could get its hands on satellite imagery like Google does, but Google's collection is something truly special that nobody else seems to have. YouTube, when it comes to training a video AI model, Google has all the cards. Android, great. Same thing, Google knows everything there is to know about phone usage. Chrome, like click data, you bet your browser has been using this in search result, this data in search. It also must scare them watching the massive engagement numbers on ChatGPT. And then Gmail on top of that. The Google system is just, it's just everywhere. They know everything there is to know about email usage, email trends, content, email everything. There has to be major actionable data coming out of Gmail that could be used to train an AI model. It's so true. They've got a massive, data centers upon data centers upon data centers of information. So jumping right into this one, what kind of opportunities does AI tools like ChatGPT open up for search? How do we actually use, Aaron and I always talk about AI as a tool, and to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Before you jump into an AI tool, you're really looking at what problem am I trying to solve. So what opportunities do AI tools like ChatGPT open up for search?
I guess, we're seeing the generative search experience, which Google is experimenting with. So that's one of the things that, AI tools in general are just opening up to make things smarter, make things better. And really, I guess the key thing is, Google is able to own it themselves. So rather than telling, hey, SEOs, stop doing, SEO in a black hat kind of way, they'll just do it themselves if they decide they don't like the way it's done. But, that's kind of one negative outlook. But at the same time, AI opens up, the potential that it can find minute things very quickly, very effectively, and also expand on those ideas. So, what that means for search is that search can just get a heck of a lot better if it wants to. There's been a lot of critiques on Google lately, especially with things like ChatGPT that are opening up the conversation and being more critical. And, Google could use this and what AI already knows to become more effective
Right.
and do things better. And maybe, it would be nice to see search get a little less corporate.
Ooh.
That's something that I've been thinking about a lot personally, is just how, there's a lot of smaller websites or people who are creative online, and they're kind of unfindable right now. It would be really awesome to have a way that, because AI is the potential is kind of unlimited in the sense that it's constantly learning, constantly improving, getting out of the corporate kind of just everything's just too corporate. If you're looking for search results on Google, so many of the results you're getting are on Google's display network, and they're full of ads, and it's a little bit vomit inducing at times. It'd be nice to see things get smarter in a way that they can be more effective at finding things that can be hyper specific.
I can definitely see that as being valuable, so that those little hidden gems are gems, but they don't need to stay hidden.
Yeah.
Which would be really cool. Does that actually worry you? Is this like, obviously AI, there's like threats to some industries, some more than others. Is it a big threat right now to SEOs? Is it like, how do you view it? Obviously threat comes with opportunity, and opportunity comes with risk. And how do you see it?
Well, it's interesting because I've dealt with marketers who are not necessarily SEO fluent, who are saying, oh, I'm done using Google, I only use ChatGPT now, or whatever they're using. I think we should be worried. Any big market shakeup, there has been websites that have come claiming to be a little bit of a Google killer, let's say. I remember when DuckDuckGo first came out, there was a lot of community backing behind that, because it was, coming from being kind of independent, and obviously it wasn't going to supersede Google, but it was legitimately probably threatening Bing.
Right.
Big
great grassroots movement when that started.
Yeah, and it's like, some of the smaller search engines that maybe got a tiny piece of the pie got a tinier piece of the pie after them. I think it's important to constantly evolve the industry, and I just think SEO will change, there's certainly going to be, in the same way that we've seen Canadian laws change here, where it's like, hey, we're not getting Canadian news represented the way it ought to, or we're losing clicks to our news sites and things like that. If Google owns too much of the information, that suddenly they own all the information and nobody's using anything else, there will be a lot of backlash to that. So I don't think things are going to move in such a negative direction, but I certainly think that SEO should be worried if they're not keeping on top of what's going on in the industry right now.
I see that, like, it is not making, so like the AI tools that I'm familiar with are not making it easier to be a good SEO. Like, the barrier of entry to being good is still very high. So it's not like this is increasing like a massive influx of people that are entering the industry and then able to absolutely crush it. I think the barrier, it's not breaking that down. I think it's making it harder to be good. It's not making it easier to get there. Mm-hmm. Is that true? Is that what you're seeing?
In terms of just, being able to be well versed in conducting SEO? Yeah, I mean, there's always people who, read a few articles and maybe think they've got SEO figured out.
I wish. I wish. That's me.
But it's definitely something that I think you do see a difference with people who have been doing SEO for a long time, because one of the things is that Google will say, for example, the latest core algorithm update that, they're doing this change to combat spam. And then somebody's like, hey, my spam website's doing great now. Like, thanks, Google. So, they'll say things that don't actually have like a reality to them in the way that they say it does, and you only kind of get experience about what to expect by being in the industry and kind of weathering many different things. It takes time to understand and adapt and learn and do SEO better. The first time you do SEO, you're reading what Google tells you to do and doing everything well, and then you might be looking at it and saying, well, I'm still not getting any traction, it's not going anywhere. You only kind of learn through experience and time about how to experiment and adapt and change, and you will be able to have at least some experience to come back to and say, okay, well, I've actually seen something similar to this before, and I can interpret it that way. And so with big changes like AI tools and that sort of thing, I can look at what Google is doing and experimenting with and say, I've seen Google experiment and do things many other ways before. I can read between the lines on what's going to be going on here. But
that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell. But I think also, especially if you're new in this space, like being amongst other people in the industry and being active is going to be important, And
when you say be active, it's like read, contribute, follow along. So like it's not just like you going to work every day and following with whatever operational strategy going on in your workplace. You're saying actually get out in the community, get onto some of the get into some of the websites and connect with some professionals that are doing it, that have been doing it since the beginning, and actually go learn from. Because again, like from my knowledge in it, like this isn't like you're going to go to post-secondary and get a great like undergraduate degree in SEO. You have to just get in it. Like you're going to have a fundamental understanding of how a search engine works and where that is, and then you have to go do it. It's almost like an apprenticeship in a way, where you're like, you have to go and get on the job experience, and then you're still going to be limited because you're only going to be exposed to what that company's able to provide you. So you got to go get into the industry at large.
Yeah, I mean, having mentors, with anything technical, it's always important to have people who can mentor you or teach you. Even if you're doing SEO in a silo, like being able to learn from developers and other people working on the website, marketers, because SEO gets you involved in all of those things anyways. You're going to want to be involved and know some things in that regard. So, SEO isn't really an island, and it's not a checklist, and it's one of those things where sometimes you kind of need a little bit of intuition, and you only get intuition from experience.
I like that. This is going to be one of the last ones. Is Google too big to fail, or too big to fall, or fail? Like that's really it. I know that they've got their grasp on so many things. They produce hardware, they produce smart IoT devices, they produce wearables, like half the email world is on it. Like they are all over the place. So from my perspective, they could get crushed at one specific portion of their business. So like if it's a wearable, you've got heavy competition there. But overall, they're a giant. They're a giant among giants. What's your opinion on, are they too big to fall or to fail?
I think it's interesting because look at a company like Microsoft and how big like Windows 95 was, and how much of the market Microsoft had with their operating systems, and how big Apple was able to shake things up, and their market share ain't the same.
No,
you know?
no, it went from like IBM, Windows, Apple, and now like there is a very clear portion of that pie that is not Windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it used to be huge, right? And I think a lot of people felt like Microsoft at that point was too big to really fail. And Google is very good at diversifying,
Okay. Right.
you know, which we've seen. But we could certainly see Google search maybe have
Take a big hit.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's impossible, you know. I mean, what the next iteration will look like, I think it's a lot about what the, you know, what the consumers want and what people want out of a search engine. And once there's people, you know, and other technology shaking that up, suddenly if there's a good idea, you know, in the same way that Apple, you know, was able to shake up smartphones with, well, really they created the smartphone, but they kind of shook up the whole phone industry by showing what was possible and made people excited. I don't think people are excited to use Google search anymore.
I think that's true for a while now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like tap water. You're going to turn to Google and you're expecting it to come out, but no one is not inventive or new or overly exciting. It's just you know they've popularized the term, just Google it, but it's not. I think it's peaked out. From my perspective. It's interesting that you say that because I want to make sure my definition of fall or fail isn't that they go belly up. It's they bleed enough market share so that you've got another competing name in the space. So obviously Microsoft didn't fail. They didn't fall from their like still a massive player in the operating system market in a bunch. But now they've let another competitor take a big chunk of their lunch. But they're still like, you know, if you want to consider that a failure, they're still billions of dollars. So like, is Google going to bleed market share to someone else? I think they definitely can. They, you know, that's true of pretty much every industry, whether they're in aerospace or anything. You're going to yield to someone who moves faster, who provides more value, that is novel, that is able to capture what a human being is actually wanting to use, generate excitement. There's not a whole lot of exciting things that are around specifically search.
Yeah.
Not an exciting product anymore. Like it used to be. It used to be insane.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I even hear chatter that, you know, I mean, this could be like a little bit of boomer talk, but it's like, oh, the younger generation is searching on TikTok and things like that. I don't know how, you know, legitimate that TikTok is the big competitor to Google search, but you know, it is interesting to think about how, you know, people are changing how they want to find things, and it's because that there are other options out there that are just providing a more pleasant experience in the same way that, you know, an Apple computer, there was no worry about viruses, they were quite fast, you know, they were considered to last a long time.
They were beautiful machines. They
and it's you know, and it is fundamentally different value proposition to, you know, working on a Windows computer.
Yeah.
The Windows user is going to be fundamentally different from the Apple user in the same way that maybe the Google search user will become fundamentally different from, say, you know, the TikTok searcher or the
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I was in a meeting earlier today, and they were the client I was with. They were the ChatGPT. Although they have it, there was not even a muscle memory. They could have turned to it for the answer. And I was like, hey, like, you know, you're paying for that now. Why didn't you use it? And it's just not even it doesn't even register for them yet. Where the Google is like, oh, I can Google it right away. I can talk to my phone. I can ask it something. That muscle memory is there. If that muscle gets developed where someone starts turning to a different source, I definitely believe that they're going to bleed market share for sure.
Yeah.
And it'll just be instinctual going, hey, I'm going to go and I'm just going to ask this now. I'm not going to go back.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's fascinating. The world is definitely evolving faster than I remember. Like there's big shifts in this market. So we are definitely going to be having you back for more content related to all things SEO. And I mean, you definitely have more talents outside of this as well. So we are going to be inviting you back for more because it just seems like a natural fit here. So I'm very happy that you decided to join us today, and you will be more than welcome back in the future. And then we'll do a little bit more PR next time and let people know that you're coming on, because I have a funny feeling that what we just chatted about today is at the forefront of what a lot of people are thinking about, because we get dozens and dozens of questions every week about, oh, I need SEO, my business needs to grow online, how do I do it? So this has been fantastic. So thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah,
it's been good.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Right on.
Pleasure. It's been really good topics, and it's one of those things. I'm a huge nerd, and
she is a big nerd. She is a big nerd.
And I don't get many opportunities to just talk about these things, and I find it really interesting. I mean, like, to me, it's SEO, and being an SEO person is sort of like being a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes sometimes. You gotta figure out the mystery, look at the data and what it's telling you, and piece together the puzzle. And of course, to someone who doesn't do SEO, you're like, wow, she's a huge nerd right now. She's like way too into this topic. But it is a lot of fun, and talking about the future of how this industry is going to change and how it's going to impact businesses. It's a lot of fun for me.
You're definitely a passionate person around this. So knowing these are the type of people that you're like, that's what makes us excited to work with you. It's just like, yeah, you actually care about it. You're not like, oh my God, I gotta throw myself out of bed to try and get in front of the computer. It's like, no, I'm actively engaged in the community. I want to be here. I want to be at the forefront. That's what makes it fun.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. We'll wrap it up there, and then we'll see everyone next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.